All right, fact check this podcast. And tonight I'm joined by my good friend Mark, and we are going to, instead of doing history they didn't teach you in school, we're going to talk about changing the narrative on a classic piece of literature just a little bit in some different ways. We're going to talk about part 2 of Dune and what we thought of it. Let's kick it all off with this will be completely spoiler filled. We're not doing a spoiler free review. The book's been out since when did the book come out? Like
60.
Yeah, like it was in the 60s somewhere. So the book's been out since the 60s. There was already a movie that was done in the 80s. There was another like TV series that was done in the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s. And then like there's been part 1. If you don't know what's going on, that's on you, not on us. So this will be completely spoiler filled.
I've heard that TV series.
If you don't want that, just turn this off now and come back after you watch the movie.
I've heard that TV series is actually really good. I haven't. Thank you, Sean. I haven't seen the series. Did you watch that?
Yes, it is excellent. So personally, I think so. It was a sci-fi series, and it was, I can't remember how many parts it was, but the series covered Dune and Dune Messiah. And then they did like a made-for-TV movie that covered Children of Dune as well. And the original series was really good. I think it's the best adaptation of I think it's the best adaptation of the books that I've seen. And then, but also, it's like a mini series, so they have a little more time to do it. Although the part 1 and 2 of this iteration were 3 hours each, so they had plenty of time to cover all of that. But nonetheless, like I think the sci-fi series was probably the best. And the made-for-TV movie on Children of Dune was not as good as the original series, but it wasn't bad. They had to like age the kids up to make it like make sense, because if this movie series goes all the way out and takes it to that, like in Children of Dune, the kids are like 9 years old, and they like age them up to teenagers for the movie, just to kind of make it not seem quite so awkward, I guess. But that's neither here nor there. But yeah, it was funny when I got out of the movie the other day. I texted my dad and I was like, I really liked it. There were some things that they changed that I didn't particularly like, and then he and I got to talking about it. And I asked him if he still had the DVD set of those, because he had gotten like a special edition DVD set of those after they had come out. And he was like, "Oh, I forgot I even had those. I can't think of any reason why I would have thrown them out. So let me go check." And he found it. So nice. So I think we're gonna go home for Easter, and I may try to see if I can smuggle that out of the house and bring that back with me and sit down and watch it after we come back.
Yeah, that'd be worth checking out. Also, we did our Dune Part 1 review, 2.5 years ago at this point.
Yeah.
I think that was even before like the morning show began, if I remember correctly.
Might have been.
I think it was like the second show we ever did.
Yeah, because the first show we got reading more fiction, and then that got you, or that got us into more conversations with each other about fiction, and realizing that we both were big fans of Dune and Lord of the Rings and a lot of other stuff.
Yeah, it's coming back to me. I did make a mistake when we decided that we were going to do this. I was like, I'm going to reread the whole book before we do this show. I got 60% of the way through, which is basically the starting point of this movie that we were about to review. So my mind is a little bit goofed up at the moment regarding this whole book, but I think that I will recall the movie pretty well. And then once we start talking about the new movie, we'll get into the discrepancies and whatnot.
So speaking of that and the discrepancies, there was one thing that I remember we had discussed with part 1. like one of the big things that got talked about was race, or not race, but gender swapping Dr. Kynes in the movie. And it wasn't, I didn't think it was a big deal. Dr. Kynes still kind of serves the role that Dr. Kynes is supposed to, whether male or female, in the movie. And the way that they kill Dr. Kynes off is a little bit different from the way it's done in the book. But at the end of the day, it happens. Like, that's all that needed to happen was Dr. Kynes needs to die. And it was pointed out to me that also Dr. Kynes is, in the book, Shawnee's father. And it's just kind of assumed in the movie that Dr. Kynes is now Shawnee's mother. But at the same time, like, the other parent doesn't play a role, period. And the fact that it's either Shawnee's mother or father is really kind of inconsequential to the rest of the story. So I still don't feel like it's a big deal. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of a stretch to even put that in there. It's like, what's the point, you know? But it's one of those what's the point that I can just like gloss over and focus on the rest of the story.
Right. And it's one of those things like for the book, Dr. Kynes being Shawnee's father is just kind of an extra thing. Like, it doesn't play any part in the story. And there's a lot of stuff, like minor details like that both of these movies do not give you at all. Like, I think we talked about it with the first one. Like, if you haven't read the book, there's probably a lot of parts of the movie where you're just sitting there like, what just happened? Like, why
are there spaceships but not guns?
Right. Why are there spaceships but not guns? Or like for the second movie, since we're talking about it, why do the Fremen all of a sudden have like these laser weapons? Like, where did that come from? Like, if you aren't familiar with the book, you don't know that the Atreides were making these weapons, and that was why the Empire was afraid of them, because they had figured out how to make a new weapon that did make their shields irrelevant, which was the reason that there were no guns, because with the shields that they had, guns couldn't penetrate them. So everything was done with, knife fighting. So, there's a lot of details that get left out that if you're a fan of the book, you know this stuff, but if you don't, and that was one of the things that my dad, when we were talking about it, he was kind of upset about that. He was like, they have the weirding weapons and you see them like shooting stuff down and doing and using them, but you never get the explanation of where they came from or how they work or anything like that. Like, that was a cool part of the book with the mechanics of how those weapons work that gets left out. And I feel like that's kind of par for the course with these two movies, is there are things that are minute detail type stuff that you get from the book that if you are not a fan of the book, you don't even know that you should be asking the question, where did this come from?
Yeah. I think as far as like discrepancies go, probably the biggest failure of the movie, other than like, we'll get into the whole Chani, how she's represented and stuff, is leaving Hawat out of the second part, right?
Yeah.
The Mentat. And then also not really, do they even mention, I think they mention it in the first movie, the first part, but in the second one, like, Paul has also been trained in Mentat ways, right?
Right. And that's something that's really important, is he has the combination of the Bene Gesserit training with his military background with Duncan and
Halleck.
Yeah.
Gurney.
Yeah, Gurney, with Duncan and Gurney. But then he also had the Mentat training, and like the details about the Mentats and how they're like the human computers. Like, computers don't exist in this universe anymore because of basically Skynet. I guess is the short way to put it. Like Skynet happens, and so then they get rid of all computers, and now they have like humans who are trained and disciplined as living computers. And so like that's the mentat, and that also goes into a lot of Paul's mentality and the reason he is as smart and as calculating and the way he handles a lot of this stuff. Yeah, there's a lot of really there's a lot of intricacies and really important stuff that just kind of, if you know, you know, and if you don't even know that you should, which is upsetting.
The reason I bring this up is because, like in the second part of the movie, Paul is going through his hesitations about his role in this prophecy that the Bene Gesserit has set forth for years and years, and it makes more sense in the book because he is like the combination of Mentat and Bene Gesserit training. And there's a scene like in the book where he just dwells on the fact that he's a complete freak. And he's going back and forth. It was like, there is something like seriously wrong with me. He hates his mom. His mom is his enemy. He's like, this is sort of his inward dialogue. And his mom can tell like he's like struggling with this. And it's portrayed in the book a whole lot better than in the movie. And like you said, like the Mentat part is the calculating part. Whereas the movie sort of portrays it as Paul is hesitant up until he drinks the water of life, and then he kind of turns into a monster after he drinks the water of life, and that's not necessarily how it happens.
He was right in the book. He's already trending towards the so that inner conflict and all of his different trainings and everything kind of coming together. Like he was sort of losing his shit and becoming that monster before that. Like it was. And that's another thing that we'll talk about more later on is kind of Paul's transition. But
the combination of the spice as well.
Right. And like, yeah, there's definitely a lot of stuff that. So I feel like I know you haven't seen it, so that doesn't help. But like that miniseries, it dwells more on kind of Paul's breaking and his transition and kind of how he changes through the whole process and becomes the like warlord that he becomes. And this hasn't done a very good job of depicting him in that way all that much. And then when it does, it's like later on in the movie after he drinks the water of life, and then it kind of seems abrupt, which I guess it can be explained away by he drank the shit and now he's
it happens gradually then suddenly. That's
which
is how it happens in the book, but it's a little too sudden in the movie.
Yes.
And I think where one of the main reasons the movie struggles with that is because they try to make both Paul and Chani as two primary characters, right? Like the movie is about both of them together.
Right. It tries to make them 1A and 1B when in the book they're 1 and 2. Like it's very clearly defined 1 and 2. Like she is, and that's one of the things though. Like,
and you could even make the point that Lady Jessica is 2. There's 2A, 2B. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that would be the better. It's Paul is 1, and then Jessica and Shawnee are 2A and 2B. I think that would probably be because Shawnee is very important, but she's important for a lot of different reasons. Like not because she's like his queen fighting alongside him, but because she's the one that he's in love with and kind of is driving him. Not for any necessarily doings of her own. And that's what, so I guess we could go ahead and start into that. Because that's where this movie in particular deviates a lot, is it has her being more prominent to the reasoning behind it. Like she's more inserted into it. Whereas book wise, and you're more fresh on it than I am, but she was a little more standoffish to him, even through like as much as they were connected at the hip, she was still not like side by side. Does that make sense?
And she was not like real hesitant about like the whole prophecy part either. Like she's right. Like portrayed in the movie as just being this eventually this standalone against everyone else, following the Muad'Dib, right? And she's the one who still doesn't believe it, or thinks that they've gone too far or whatever. It's like, this is not how it happens in the book at all. Lady right. Jessica is
right. She's here for it. She's all she's ride or die.
And she when he duels was it Jameis?
Yeah.
She's when they first kind of meet up with the Fremen. She does give him pointers on like how to deal with him, and it helps. But she's like she's almost helpful right away, whereas I think, well, in part one it kind of showed she was more like hesitant to even like be around this guy, right? But there's a connection there right away. But like you said, it's not just this side by side where warriors fighting this thing together. Like she's there kind of behind him, pushing him along.
Right.
And in Lady Jessica, like the whole she does, I mean, very early on in Paul and Chani's relationship, she's like, yeah, I don't want Paul to marry her, but she can definitely serve as his concubine. And then of course she's like, well, I was kind of Duke Leto's concubine. She's like, wait, I was more than a concubine.
Right. And well, and that was something that you get to towards the end of, or I guess kind of at the end of the first book. And what I thought with the movie was a big opportunity missed was where, you know, Jessica gives the Princess Irulan that line, and she's like, you'll be his queen, but you'll never bear his children. Like you'll never be his wife. And that was like, that's one of those things that like ties Paul and Shani's relationship together, where you see that like you understand why Jessica didn't want Paul to marry Shani, because he is still of the house. Like he is the Duke. He has the name, and there is political power in that name, and remaining unmarried allows him to have that power. The same reason that Leto was not married to Jessica, because there were other political factors at play with that, and it opened doors to opportunities. So like that's where that is, like that comes in, and you kind of see that get to be built on over the next book, over Dune Messiah and everything. That's like a really, if they want to play Shani up for her importance, you have a huge opportunity there with this movie, and they just completely let it go. Like they didn't utilize that at all.
Yeah, it was a missed opportunity. And she carries twins also, and this is not mentioned. This doesn't happen in the movie. She loses them, right? Or not twins. She loses one child in the book, and then has twins later on with Paul. But yeah, in the book, Paul gets Chani pregnant, but they lose the child. So it's like Chani and Lady Jessica are both sort of carrying their respective children around the same time during this whole lead up to the climax of the movie. But
what did you think about I guess not necessarily the way they handled, but the way they just completely failed to handle Arya, the baby sister?
Yeah, kept her in the womb. Yeah.
Right. In the book, which I guess by keeping her in the womb, they like tighten up the timeline on how all this stuff happens. But like in the book, by the time that like they've done all of this war that they've been waging against the Harkonnens for, like, she's literally a toddler. She's like almost 2 years old by the time they actually like fight the final battle, and she's the one that kills
the Baron.
The Baron, yeah. So like, and like he when Paul delivers that uncle line, that's Arya's line. Like, if you want to empower women, if you want to like do the empowering women thing, why don't we get Arya delivering the uncle line and killing the Baron? Like, I mean, you can make a fucking toddler murder an old man with CGI. It's fine. You don't have to have an actual actor for that. Like,
and the excuse they probably use is like, well, for brevity's sake, I mean, we got to get through this already 3-hour-long movie. But I mean, how many movies play like dramatic music in the background as the people who aren't used to this culture's ways are learning their ways slowly, gradually? You know, like they can like make time lapse in 5 minutes. They can make months lapse in like 5 minutes with some music and
give us a 3-minute montage of them fighting in the desert, and Arya's born, and you know, you get some training with the weirding weapons. Like, would it really have been that difficult to tie some storylines in? And also, like, again, Arya is a huge part of this story. Like, and we just completely bypass her entirely for this movie. I really didn't like that. Like, I kept wondering, when is she going to come into play? When is she when is she going to get to kill the Baron? Because that's like a huge moment in the book.
Yeah.
And it also ties in so much to her in the future. Like, if they're going to keep doing this and they're going to do Messiah and children and so on and so forth, like, she needs to be the one that kills the Baron, because that plays into her kind of losing her mind later on in the story. It's like there's a lot of big moments here that you just left her in the womb.
Yeah, I don't know what I mean. Messiah is just going to be quite the undertaking, anyways, already. Because what exactly are they going to do with Paul and Messiah? It's just, is it going to be a conflict between Paul and Chani while she bears his twins? And
also Messiah is going to be a massive undertaking anyway, because this is when Paul goes on his conquest to end the Empire, more or less. And
he becomes Space Hitler or whatever.
Yeah, and then comes back to Arrakis. There's a lot. I mean, I guess maybe with the way that it ended, they still leave it open to tying up some of those loose ends, like in the opening of the third movie, because apparently there will be a part 3. We are doing Messiah, so there's an opportunity to bring some of that together, tie up those loose ends, because you didn't get the formal, like, or I don't think you got the formal, like, all right, Irulan is going to be wed to Paul now. Like, this is for real happening. Because like that was the thing, was he said that was his prize if he won, but then he won, and then they just take off into space because they're not respecting his victory. Like, so they never really make that formal. And like when he says that, they pan to Shawnee and have to show her being like really butthurt about it. It's like, I'm pretty sure in the movie or in the book, she understood what was going on. Like, she knew that Irulan had absolutely no position other than an official title, and like she would be the bride, but not ever the actual wife.
Right. And it's I actually like one of my favorite things about the book is Irulan's like little recollections at the beginning of each chapter. You know what I'm talking about? Like, it's like her diary looking back at this whole saga, right?
Yeah. It's kind of like how Star Wars. I don't know if you've ever read any of the Star Wars book. Like, the Star Wars books are kind of it's kind of done like, it's so the the constant characters throughout all of Star Wars are the droids, R2 and C-3PO, and it's kind of like their the story is being recounted through the droids throughout the whole thing, and that's kind of how Dune is with her little like notes and stuff. It's almost like this is all like the history of Dune.
She'll talk about her father, the Emperor.
Yeah.
Which actually, earlier today, I was reading the chapter where she says her father was 72 when Muad'Dib came to rise, but he looked no older than 35, which that obviously was not the case in the movie with
Christopher Walken.
Yeah, Walken.
Yeah, they had Christopher Walken play Christopher Walken as the Emperor.
Yeah, he was just there. I don't know that I have many thoughts about his performance. If you do,
but was the Emperor? I mean,
he's not. He's just kind of referred to. Like you hear most about him in these things that we're talking about. These little diary entries from
right. Like that was like I didn't have a particularly strong opinion one way or the other of who they had portray the Emperor.
Yeah.
Like, as long as he doesn't become too focal of a point, because the Emperor was never a super focal point. He's the guy that tells the people to do the things because he's told to tell the people to do the things by the people who actually run the Galactic Empire.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. There is
kind of like our current government works.
Sure. There is another entry at the beginning of a chapter where Irulan is like, yeah, so we deprived, due to the Bene Gesserit way, we deprived my father, the Emperor, of an heir because he wasn't allowed to have a son. And she said, well, then Lady Jessica is the only one who sort of went against that. And at the end, she's just like, and we saw who won, or which way worked best at the end. Kind of an
that's another one of the things that there's a lot of detail and explanation into with that. I think in the first movie, I don't recall. I know there was a little bit of it, but there wasn't a whole lot of depth with what a betrayal of the Bene Gesserit that was for Jessica to have a son and not to have a daughter, which is what she was supposed to do, and with Paul, like the way she raised Paul and trained Paul, like it was all a massive slap in the face to their order. And it gets kind of very quickly glossed over in the first movie. Like it doesn't get a whole lot of explanation. Again, like a lot of other
a little more
things.
subtle with her, between her and like the Reverend Mother at the beginning when they're about to do the Gom Jabbar scene.
Yeah,
like there's not a whole lot of dialogue surrounding it. It's more just the subtle looks of anger that the Reverend Mother gives Lady Jessica. Because she was like her best. I think she does say, or maybe it just says in the book, like Lady Jessica was her best pupil, and she still loves her, but she went against their order, as you said. And so there's that tension there. I do like the Bene Gesserit, that whole thing, setting up the prophecy. That's like one of my favorite things about the whole Dune universe, though. And the fact that it's like, I think that people like argue to this day over like, is it complete fabrication? Are there true believers? Is it just like this? Is it a case of like self-fulfilling prophecy to where like you don't believe it at first, but these things start playing out in the way that they do, and it's like, oh well, maybe in the back of our head we knew that this prophecy was actually truth and not a fabrication. Just kind of dwelling on all these different aspects of it. You have thoughts about that?
Yeah, I guess I kind of that's an interesting, because I think Jessica believed, right? Like she wasn't doing it
in order for her to go against the order. She had to have some form of belief,
right?
But even as they're like in the desert trying to survive, like obviously you're pretty close to death, or one like bad thing could happen, you're dead right away, right? So that suspends your belief, obviously, when you're afraid of death, but fear is the mind killer. So let's get that out of our mind real quick.
Well, and that's like she saw something in Leto that she thought this was the way to go. Like this could produce the fulfilling of the prophecy. Like whether or not the others. All right, I'm going to tie this back to the Catholic Church a bit. So, have you seen and heard some of there's been a lot of stuff that's come out over the last couple years, especially since Pope Benedict passed and his book was released and stuff. Like the number of people who are in the priesthood in the Catholic Church that do it for a job, not because they actually believe fuck all for anything. You have to kind of think that like some of the higher ups in the Bene Gesserit that have been in it for long enough and utilize it as a means of power and control don't believe any of that shit. They just think that they're doing this stuff because this is the thing that we've always been telling people, like it's all bullshit, but we're going to keep doing it because it allows us to keep our thumb on the power. And then you have the people that actually like believe it, like Jessica, and see the opportunity to bring it to fruition. Like I kind of feel like that's the dividing line there. So you see the different power structures play out in the Bene Gesserit themselves in their whole like shadow organization of kind of running things from behind the scenes. You've got the ones that actually believe, and then you've got the ones that are in it for the power.
And then it becomes similar to like we see in our own statecraft today. You have just elites fighting back and forth with each other, right? If you want to look at the Bene Gesserit, within the Bene Gesserit, you have two different factions fighting against, and then you also have the Imperium and the Bene Gesserit sometimes working in unison, sometimes completely against each other, working against each other to create or maintain an order that they want to maintain. And then you see like that there's definitely elements of disbelief in the prophecy when they sort of introduce Fade Rotha, right? I mean, some of the Bene Gesserit are like, yeah, he's our guy. We think he can do it. So they send what's her face to seduce him and secure his heir so they can just keep the process in movement.
Yeah, but even like I guess in the book, they didn't have nobody had the faith in Fade. Like Fade, Fade was the Fade was like the last ditch effort to like calm what was happening because it was getting out of their control. And it's like, do we want this guy? Oh fuck no.
Yeah. There is one comment in the book when Fade arrives on scene and the lady, I can't remember her name, is like, well, this one at least won't get fat. So that's sort of she maybe has a little bit more belief in him than the Baron at that moment in time. But
all right, since we're on the Harkonnens,
oh, here we go. I want to hear your redheaded rant here.
Yeah, how do you feel about the fact that like okay, so this is like the elimination of redheads from like everything has been happening across all of like movie or like cinema and television for a while now. Like traditionally ginger and either getting race swapped or gender swapped or both. Like they are wholesale removing redheads from everything. And then you get like the perfect opportunity where they can be the bad guy. And if you really are trying to get rid of them by like, if you want to get rid of them, then you want to demonize them, right? Like that's how Nazis became so, it's like, it's why Russia is, all the Russians are bad because they demonized them through the entirety of the 80s and 90s. Like if you're trying to get rid of the redheads and everything, make them the fucking bad guys. You have the perfect opportunity with the Harkonnens, and instead they don't give them any hair at all. They just like completely smooth them down. Like turtle wax these motherfuckers up and don't let them have any hair. Like, they don't even get to have nice, pretty red eyebrows like you do. Like, nothing at all. It's terrible. Like, just fucking terrible. I'm so disappointed. Like, because not just because it's like the removal of redheads from all of fucking media, but like, that's a prominent part of the book. Like, that's a prominent part of the description of them is their red hair.
Yeah. I don't know what you want to say.
Just lick them off. No,
I know that the
I expected Fade to at least have like impressive eyebrows like Sting did in like the 80s movie. Nope. Nothing. No hair at all.
Bald, muscular dude who can fight pretty well. But the Baron's like, so they had the chance. So I remember watching the Baron in the 80 movie, 84 movie, whenever that was made. And he is a very sloppy, redheaded, gay pedophile. Which is, I mean, he's pretty much hinted that he is a gay pedophile in the book. Like, this isn't a secret. Obviously, or maybe not obviously. I mean, of course, they're not going to put all that in the movie. But I do remember liking the Baron in the earlier movie better than this one, because even though he's just nasty and disgusting, there is still like that sort of those evil machinations. You can see like his gears spinning, and
he's a little he's a little in the 80s movie. He's a little over the top in the nasty side of it. Yeah. And then in this version, he's a little over the top in the like sadistic psychopath side of it.
He might be too fat in this recent one.
And again, this one is where I go back to the sci-fi series. That one did the actor who portrayed the Baron was the guy who was did you ever watch the HBO series Rome? Oh shit. He's always like a fat loud guy. Because he's fat. The actor, that is. So anyway, the guy who portrays the Baron in the sci-fi series, it was the perfect blend of like slovenly and also sadistic. Like, it wasn't too over the top disgusting like the 80s series, but it also wasn't too over the top with like being psychopath evil like the current movies. It was the right blend of fat, gross, evil thing. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. As the sci-fi series, like I said, I've said it plenty of times. The sci-fi series, if you can find it anywhere, because it's virtually impossible to fucking find it anywhere. Like, the fact that Dad still has a physical copy of it is amazing, because I can't find it anywhere. I've looked at secondhand stores, I've looked on Amazon, everywhere. I can't find it. Like, it's definitely the best iteration of Dune that's out there. Highly recommend.
I shall have to try and find it.
What were some other things? I know. What were some other things that we kind of had some qualms with? I know. I had sent you the one thing where somebody, I can't remember who it was now, was like mad that Shawnee got played up as like this beastly warrior type thing, and I was like, I never saw that. Where I didn't see anything that made me think that Shawnee was like some amazing warrior that was like taking down the Sardaukar or anything. There was about
there were a few scenes that
there's like a 30-second scene where it's in the middle of a dust storm and everybody's like attacking, and she's like running through slashing people. It's like, I didn't really see anything. Like, she didn't like pick anybody up and break them over their knee like Bane on doing Batman style or anything. So I don't know. Maybe I missed something.
I don't know. I guess that's part of something. I didn't go into the movie not expecting to see that. I expected to see Shawnee being portrayed as the warrior, as what she was depicted as in the movie, is what I saw. You know, like, that didn't show. It's like one of those things that didn't like shock me. So I guess if I'm not like shocked, I guess I have a hard time getting pissed off. Like, I was entertained by the movie mostly. So Yeah, that's all I really got on her. And I think it's more like it's less about her being this great warrior, like we said, and just being 1A, 1B with Paul is the biggest issue I had with that whole relationship and with her characterization.
Do you think some of that is an attempt to like whitewash Muslim culture? Because it's hard to read Dune and not see the Muslim parallels, and like the way she behaves herself in the movie would not be tolerated in actual Muslim culture, like the way she calls out Stilgar, like in the forum and stuff like that. Like some of that stuff, it wouldn't happen. Like she would know her place as she does in the book. Do you think that's kind of an attempt to, or is it just the girl power thing?
I don't know about Muslim culture particularly, but it's definitely like, I mean, if Muslim culture has more of an understanding of the masculine role versus the feminine role, then that would be one way to more like specify it, I guess. But I think it's more the differentiation between like masculine roles and feminine roles as a more like overarching thing than anything. It is interesting to like look at what Frank Herbert has said about his writing of Dune, right? Like there is the quote where he was trying to write about ecology, right? It was a book about ecology. It's a cool book about ecology, I guess. And then there are definitely like parts in the book where he really dwells on the moisture and the sand and all this stuff, right? Like it's not my favorite parts of the book, but
well, and that becomes a huge theme through Messiah and then into children. I've only read the first 3 books. I haven't read the 4th, 5th, and 6th, and I there's a little piece of me that feels like I need to sit down and start at the beginning and read through all 6 of them. Because I feel like if I picked it up on number 4, there's enough stuff that I've forgotten about number 3 that I'm gonna be like missing shit. But so like there is a lot of the ecology stuff comes a lot more into the later parts of Messiah and through Children of Dune, because like kind of part of Paul as the Mahdi is it's changing the ecology of Arrakis and bringing water back to this barren planet,
turning it into a paradise.
Yeah, and to turn it into a paradise. But then what that ends up doing is that starts to disrupt the spice supply, because as it turns out, having just a giant sandball where these worms can just burrow and run around all the time, they create the worms create the spice. I don't know if that's explicitly gotten into in the movies, but it might even be a thing that they kind of learn when they are trying to transform Arrakis into a paradise. Is they find out that the reason Arrakis has all this spice is because of the worms, and the worms need it to be dry so they can just burrow and create spice. And when they start introducing water to the planet, then that starts and in green growing things, that starts to cut off the amount of space that the worms have, and now the worms aren't growing to the correct size that they can produce the spice. And it's a whole, there is a huge piece of the ecological thing. And then Leto II is like, his role is to kind of restore order to Arrakis and the spice. And so there is a lot of that goes into it, but that's later on. That's not so much in the definitely not in the first one.
Yeah, there was also a quote that I saw, and I don't even know if it's it could be a Frank Herbert quote, because I've read a little bit about his backstory, but he kind of compares Paul to JFK, because JFK was like, have you seen this? he's like, JFK was charismatic leader whom everyone loved, but he got us into Vietnam. I mean, I guess he did basically start a lot of that, right? And lots of people died from that. And then he then spoke highly. He's like, when we see what like the charismatic leaders do, like they're not always the people that you should follow. And then he talks about how Richard Nixon led by example. And I know like Frank Herbert he was kind of like a normie Republican, or like I think he was a Nixon supporter. He worked for a Republican staffer or politician at one point in his life. So just an interesting quote or just a glimpse into the mind of the guy who wrote the book.
I found out Isaac Asimov was a raging liberal.
I could see that.
kind of hurt my soul a little bit because
Yeah.
I'm a huge Asimov fan. Yeah, Asimov had some things to say about Frank Herbert's opinions on things. I don't remember how I ended up down that rabbit hole, but it was so. Well,
And Tolkien didn't like Dune, also, is what I've learned. I don't know if you've heard this.
no, I hadn't heard of that.
And I think that makes sense because, Lord of the Rings, there is a clear triumph of good over evil, whereas Dune is like, well, are there good guys here? Is there a good guy?
Yeah.
Are they all bad?
Dune makes it hard to figure out if there is actually a good guy. Like you can definitely know who the bad guys are, but none of the good guys are like. So that was one of the things. When I was talking to my dad about the movie and stuff afterwards, he said that some of like the slight changes that they've made to like Paul's personality and stuff to make him come across. What's the word I'm looking for? I don't know, like abrasive. Like once he does kind of embrace once he drinks the water of life and kind of starts to switch gears, he becomes a little more hard to like, I guess. But at the same time, like, excuse me, maybe not, depending on how you're looking at it. If you know the story, like if you're just watching the movie, you might think that Paul's become sort of a megalomaniac type, which is also accurate. But like Herbert didn't like how Paul was viewed as a hero by a lot of the like fans of the series and stuff, because Herbert intended for Paul to be like this destroyer. And I think you and I talked about it too. Like, yeah. Paul is clearly the destroyer. Like, that's what he's going to do. That's what he spends a decent portion of the second book doing, is just straight up fucking destroying. But like, if Herbert's upset that Paul gets viewed as a heroic type figure, that's on Herbert. Like, that's him not reading the room, because like people are going to see this character who, for all of this charisma and all of this like megalomaniac type behavior, is going to tear down a corrupt system. Like, people want to see that corrupt system get tore down, because they can see that corrupt system in their own life and they want to see it torn down there too. So like if Herbert didn't like how Paul became viewed as a hero by a lot of the fans of the books, that's more on Herbert than on like the fans. Like, it wasn't them misunderstanding Paul, it was Herbert misunderstanding how they would view that destroyer.
Yeah. And honestly, I don't begrudge Herbert for that at all. Like, how do I put this? Like, I sent you that tweet, but what is it, Bennett's Philodactyly or whatever, where he's like, there's a story in Dune, and the author may have not even seen the full of it, right? The whole of it. And the directors of this movie didn't see the whole of it, but there are people who do see it. And that's actually a sign of really good writing. Like, I don't know, I've written a few things in my life where I look back and like read the story and I was like, oh, I missed this element that was put in there. Maybe someone else like saw it the first time. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes you write a story and you have an intended theme or message in there, but there's also subliminal ones that you, I guess, subconsciously like put in there as part of the story. that you didn't have at the forefront of your mind, but maybe you reread it again 2-3 times later and you're like, oh, I missed those elements, even though I'm the one that wrote it. So this, I can completely feel for Frank being like, this is not the character that I wrote, but at the same time, like, you wrote a great character. Like, that's completely fine. And it's almost better for someone to produce a piece of work or art like that as opposed to trying to force something down someone's throat, right? Like, this is our biggest complaint with everything new that comes out.
Right. If he was
just write a good story.
If he was explicitly trying to write the story around Paul being this unsympathetic destroyer type of a character, then he'd have ended up butchering the book because because it would have been all about, like, Paul's entire personality would have been the destroyer, and you wouldn't have had anything else that actually made him a good figure, a good character, a good enough character that when he does, like, in the second and even especially in, like, Children of Dune, when he kind of makes his, like, shadowy return and he's like full on fucking psychopath, like, you still kind of feel for him. It's like, this dude's been through some shit. Like, yeah, I get why he lost his fucking mind.
Yeah. And there may have been some longing in Frank's mind for a character like Paul. He just didn't really know how to tap into it, or he didn't realize it. I don't know. Like, J.R.R. Tolkien says that his experiences in the First World War, like, did not contribute to his writing of Lord of the Rings whatsoever. And I respect him saying that, but obviously they did. They did contribute greatly to his writing of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, I think no matter how much you may try to remove things, it's going to be a part of your writing.
Yeah, in one of the introductions to Lord of the Rings, he's like, by the time I was 20 or 21, all of my friends were dead. It's like, yeah, I think that maybe had a little bit to do with these books you wrote.
Could have had some sort of impact. Was there anything else? I'm looking forward. So, how much have you read of the Dune?
Of Dune.
Just Dune?
Just
okay.
Dune.
So, personally, I think Messiah and Children of Dune are the story. Like, Dune kind of sets the table for the story to be told. Like, I felt the same way. So, like, Ender's Game is a cool book. The next 3 in that series are the actual story. Like, Ender's Game just kind of just establishes the universe that the next 3 books are going to take place in. But Ender's Game is the one that everybody knows, and nobody knows about the other ones, where the actual meat of the story is. I kind of feel like that. I feel that way about Dune too. Like, Dune is the book everybody knows, but Messiah and Children are where the story really starts to happen. Like, that's where the meat of it is. So I'm really excited and looking forward to the way they're going to do it, or not necessarily the way that they're going to do it, but seeing them do it, and then getting to either be happy about it or be pissed off about it, or probably enjoy it for what it is, and then talk to you about how the book was so much better.
I've heard that they're planning on doing like a mini series on Bene Gesserit as well. Have you heard this? Which has the potential to be pretty bad, but
honestly, that just sounds like a disaster in the making. That sounds like Disney Plus She-Hulk for Dune. Like, I don't see any way that can produce anything positive. Like, the Bene Gesserit work in the Dune universe because they play a very specific role, and you don't have to spend a whole lot of time, like, dealing with them. If we have to listen to them talk to each other on and on, like, it's just going to become woman bullshit. Like, it's why they have a small role, and it works that way. And when are we going to get the Spacing Guild? Like, there's the Spacing Guild is not a huge part, but the way that they move ships through space and the stuff and their importance to the universe is explained pretty in detail through the first book, so that you kind of understand you kind of understand who they are and why they're important, because that makes it's important to the story going forward, especially where the spice production is concerned and stuff, and the way that stuff gets moved around through this universe is based on the Spacing Guild and their use of spice. There's really very, very, very little about them at all in these two movies. Like zero at all, like not even at all in the second movie, and only just very, very little in the first movie. So like they're gonna have to expand on. They need to expand on that part of the universe, like that could be like a 4-part miniseries just to explain why the Spacing Guild is important. Because if you don't have the importance of the Spacing Guild, then Messiah and children like doesn't really know. Who cares, right? Like it doesn't matter how much spice is produced if you don't understand the importance of that to the Spacing Guild and how shit gets moved around through the universe. There's a lot of for two almost 3-hour movies, like 6 hours worth of movie, there's a whole lot of shit that gets left out.
We'll see how long they make the series last.
Oh, is there going to be like a special edition director's cut that's like 4.5 hours long, like the Lord of the Rings movies had the 4-hour director's cuts that for as good as Peter Jackson did of including everything from the books in the theatrical cuts, the director's cuts had even more.
I know. I saw that the
way to watch those movies for a true fan of the books is you have to watch the 4-hour director's cuts, because everything that you're like, well, they left out this little piece, and I understand why they left it out because it doesn't necessarily tie into the movie, but it was a cool part of the book. Well, then you go watch the 4-hour director's cut and you get all of it. Like
they still didn't put Tom Bombadil in the is it Bombadil, right? And
Bombadil?
Fellowship of the Ring, yeah. Even in the director's cut, he's not there. You can't please everyone.
Yeah.
I did see that the director of Bill in the Woo, is that Bill in the Wave? I don't know how to say his name. He said that no one is ever going to see the scenes he cut of the Mentat. So we'll see if that is true.
What a bastard. Never mind. I've changed my opinion. I hate it all now. We need the Snyder cut of this. Anything else?
I don't think so.
At the end of it, I walked out of it and I was like, I really liked it. It was a good movie. There were some things that I didn't like, but the things that I didn't like didn't make me dislike the movie.
I was entertained for 3 hours.
Right. So. It just made me want to go back and reread the books.
Yeah, for sure.
Have you ever? No, because you haven't read past the first book. I was gonna say his. So I think it's Herbert's son has done like a series talking about the different houses of the universe and like there's so kind of like how Tolkien's son has like put together some different stuff from him on like that like expands the Middle Earth and everything. Herbert's son has done a number of books talking about the different houses of the Dune universe and stuff. Like there's a whole bunch of outside of just the original 6 books. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that, and I'm assuming Frank has like worked with his son on kind of putting that stuff together. But there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into more.
And I guess Brian Herbert approved of this movie, which. I mean, I guess I wouldn't expect him to say, this sucked, don't watch this or whatever. So he knows that it gets people interested in his father's work, which is probably important to him. So,
I mean, if it gets them interested in that, then it's going to get them interested in the stuff that he did as well. So,
right.
It's just a way to keep it all alive. I do need to go back and check out some of those, some of the stuff that goes into more the houses and things like that. Overall, it's the way they paint this whole universe and the way they create it. I think it looks right. It feels right. It's got a good aesthetic to it. The way the characters behave outside of the Shawnee girl boss stuff, like it's not particularly off from the book. Like I think it's very good. I'm pleased with this adaptation, which I can't say for the Foundation. Speaking since I did mention Asimov, I can't say the same for Apple TV's version of Foundation. That was or Amazon's version of Lord of the Rings. Holy fuck!
I did not watch Rings of Power. I've only read one Asimov book, so I haven't checked that out either. Sounds like I shouldn't though.
I got about halfway through. I can't remember if it was the third. I think it was I got halfway through the third episode of Rings of Power before I was like, nope, fuck this, I'm out. I watched the entire first season of Foundation because I have all of Asimov's written works except for like 3 books. Like there's only 3 that I'm missing out of his entire collection, and I've read almost all. I've got a book and a half left of finishing the entirety of the Foundation series, and when the Foundation TV show came out on Apple TV, I watched the entire first season, and I was just like, I think you could see it on my face, like how disgusted I was with how badly they portrayed this like Asimov's universe, and Stephanie was like, I was like, none of this is right. Like it's not. This is not what it's supposed to look like. And Stephanie was like, well, is it not the way it's supposed to look like in your mind? Or no, he's like, no. Like if you read Asimov, if you read Foundation, he spends literally pages going into great, excruciating detail to make sure that you know exactly what it is you're looking at with this universe. Like it's not left up to interpretation. There's no room for like your personal view of it. It's all there in words, exactly what it is. And this is fucking garbage.
This isn't it.
So I watched the first season hoping that like at some point it would get better, and it never did. And then they made a second season, and I canceled my Apple TV subscription because I didn't want to watch that shit. Because if I had the subscription, I might be tempted to, and then I'm just going to spend the entire second season being pissed off even more. And there's already enough stuff that pisses me off in my life. I don't need that shit. So like that's just remove negativity from your life and you'll be better for it. Also save some money. Actually, I don't think I was paying for that. I think I got it free because I'd upgraded my phone or something.
Yeah, I think I remember the free Apple TV for a year or something. I never watched a single thing because nothing looked appealing to me.
They do have a show called Silo that was pretty good. But
okay, this is way off, but you just reminded me of like what didn't look like what I imagined.
We've already gone out into left field. That's cool. Just keep going.
The most recent like Narnia movies that were made, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe looked like what I imagined, more or less what I imagined while reading the book. Prince Caspian pissed me off. That looked nothing like what I imagined when I was reading that book, and then that was over it at that point. And I think they only made Dawn Treader after that, and we're done anyways.
And I didn't even watch Dawn Treader. Like they butchered Prince Caspian so badly that I didn't even bother with Dawn Treader, and I assumed that they did terrible with it.
Yeah, and I get it's hard to make. I would have a hard time making a Narnia movie. Like you got talking animals. Like this is kind of goofy, right? But Lion, the Witch, Wardrobe was fine. I have The Last Battle is like one of my favorite books ever, like of any genre, and I would love to see a movie adaptation of it. But I also know it'll probably be awful at the same time. So
yeah, unless you just got like an fanatical purist to do the movie, because if it had any Hollywood influences in it whatsoever, they would completely butcher The Last Battle. There's too much going on in that for it would have to be done purely to the way it was written. And there was so much potential with that, like with those books, because like you said, the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe was fairly well done. They added some stuff in that was unnecessary and kind of stupid, and it was.
And the White Witch was awful in that movie. Like that
Yeah.
is not who I thought the White Witch would look like at all. I
She
thought
need-
the White Witch would be attractive. I
yeah,
imagined
she needed to be a lot prettier and a lot more intimidating. Like, and
That's some bug-eyed freak. It looks like she's
right
on meth.
for as much as I like Tilda Swinton and a lot of things that she's in, like that's not that no, that was not the right. That was poorly cast. But otherwise, like the kids were fine, and the Prince Caspian was just terrible. It was just so like they added so much stuff that was unnecessary to it. Especially because that was one that I've read all of them, but I also had audiobooks for. I had the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, Prince Caspian, Dawn Treader, and the Silver Chair on audiobook. So I listened to those just over and over and over and over and over again. So like I could almost go like word for word, like how that especially Prince Caspian and the Voyage of the Dawn Treader should have gone. And Prince Caspian was so far off from the book. I was just like, I can't do this. Like,
don't recognize the story.
Right. This is not the book. And that's cool. Like if I think I've talked about it before, like with the Bourne books, like the Bourne Identity, Bourne Supremacy, and the Bourne Ultimatum. Like they went into those movies very, very explicitly stating, we are not trying to recreate the book. We are creating a Jason Bourne character with a lot of other supporting characters from the stories, but we're not trying to recreate the story. Like, and if you've read those books, it would be really hard to make a movie out of those without it being like a really hard R. It's
not that hard R.
Right. Right. Not the one that I'm used to. The for the ratings system. Yeah, it would be hard to make those books into a movie and do it justice. So instead of trying to do that, they said we're going to create a Bourne story that takes similar elements, but it doesn't actually, try to mimic the book. And I'm cool with that. Like they were upfront about that. Like that's the way they did it, and that's cool. And I understood with that. But like if you're going to come out and you're gonna be like, we're gonna make the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, then it needs to be the Lion, the Witch, and the fucking Wardrobe. It doesn't need to be your interpretation of it. So
I agree.
All right, we're coming back next Thursday to talk about Napoleon.
Next Thursday.
Speaking of interpretations of things,
have you watched that movie? That terrible movie.
You put me off to it. Like you told me how you just.
You don't have to watch it. That's not.
Tell me how terrible it was, and it was like
that is not needed homework for Napoleon because it's awful.
Well, thank you. I mean, if you tell me that I need to watch it, then I will sit down and rent it, and I will watch it, and I will do it. But you convinced me that it was going to be so bad that I just couldn't talk myself into going and doing it. I even gave Katie the opportunity to talk me into it, and she chose to go see The Marvels, which might have been worse.
Have you seen Hunger Games yet?
No. I know that one's one that you are insistent that I need to watch.
You should watch that one. Yes.
Okay. I will rent that one, and we can do that for. We'll decide on a time when, because I would like to talk about like all of the Hunger Games anyway. Like I've done like I got with Johnny from Peddling Fiction, and we talked about like how would the U.S. break up into Hunger Games style districts, in our modern era, like what would those actually look like? But we didn't actually talk about like the Hunger Games, the books, or anything like that. So I would like to talk about the books and stuff at some point. So yeah, I mean, we can plan for that sometime in the future.
Sounds good. You're like piecing out on me right now.
Oh, we're getting hit with a storm, so I've got to wind. I got to wind this down and start closing windows and stuff. Thank you everybody for watching, listening, whatever. Hopefully we didn't ruin the movie for you, and if we did, that's on you. The books have literally been out for like I don't know what 60 years. Like you should have read them at some point, at least one of them, like if nothing else. So go watch the movies. Let us know what you thought of them. And in the meantime, hope you have a great rest of your week and weekend. And I will be back next week. Oh shit, what am I doing next week? I don't know. I'll remember between now and then. See, this is the problem: is I book things and then I forget, and then the person that I booked with will be like, "Hey, are we still on?" And I'm like, "Oh yes, we're doing that. I remember that now."
We'll be on like 5 minutes.
Yeah, I'm sending you the link literally right now. Let's go. All right. So next week, something I can't remember, but it'll happen. And if nothing else, next Thursday I'll do Napoleon with Mark. Have a great